From time to time, I find myself perusing the Speed Duel Reddit. And something interesting that I found lately is the amount of people that have been requesting some help with navigating how to pilot the decks from the Battle City Final set. And to be honest, I'm not that surprised to see the amount of people that are still struggling with how to pilot some of the decks from the Battle City Final set. Granted, Battle City Finals as a whole is the highest power ceiling out of any Speed Duel set we've received thus far. And some of the decks in this set are a lot more, I guess, oriented towards what the deck is trying to do, therefore having a bit more complex play within them, just because Konami's started to figure out how to make a deck that's more catered to what exactly the game plan is. So in today's video, I want to go ahead and explain exactly what the goal of each deck from Battle City Finals is, how the deck is trying to accomplish said goal, the purpose of each card in the deck, and finally, do a quick few test hands with each of the decks in order to get a better idea of how to pilot the deck if you try to play it for yourself. Now, if you do have a friend that wants to learn speed duels and or doesn't know how to play the game but you want them to learn, then feel free to share this video with them so that they can get better understanding on how to play speed duels. Also, if you find yourself enjoying today's video and would like to support the channel, then I would really appreciate if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Alright, with all that being said, let's dive right into Dueling Book. Alright then, so first deck up for discussion is Yugi himself with his Face Knight archetype / Dark Magician deck. And at first glance, this deck looks a bit more complex than what it actually is. In reality, the gist of this deck is the following. The main thing it's trying to accomplish is establish 3 monsters on the field in order to summon out one of its 2 boss monsters, those being Slifer the Sky Dragon and or Arcana Triumph Joker. But more specifically, this deck is trying to establish both King, Queen, and finally Jack's Knight all on the field in order to accomplish this. And it has quite a few ways of doing so. But before we dive more deeper into that, why exactly is this deck trying to accomplish said goal? Well, it all comes down to the skill of this deck, that being Sky God Revelation. And this skill is pretty great for the strategy. In short, what this skill does is that if you normal summon out Slifer the Sky Dragon and or Arcana Triumph Joker, you're then allowed to then draw until you have 6 cards in your hand, pretty much guaranteeing that both these monsters are going to have fairly high attack stats when you summon them out to the field. Additionally, this skill is also great for a few other reasons. This skill is also able to both search out Slifer the Sky Dragon once per duel, and also mulligan Slifer the Sky Dragon when you don't have an optimal hand where you're able to summon out the card. And that's so much versatility with this skill. Alright, now that we have the basics as to what the deck is trying to accomplish, let's go and talk about how this deck goes about completing this goal. So, one thing you'll notice is the way that I've segmented this deck. And essentially, I have it into 3 separate sections. The Face Knight archetype section, the Dark Magician section, and then the miscellaneous stuff. First off, let's just talk about the miscellaneous stuff, just so you don't have to worry about it later. Big Shield Gardener, Obnoxious Celtic Guardian, Breaker the Magical Warrior, Source of Viridian Light, Monster Reborn, Spell Shattering Arrow, Quaking Mirror Force, and finally Dust Tornado. All these cards don't particularly aid with the goal of the deck. They do assist with it, but they aren't the main plan. All these cards really are just filler for the deck. As you see, all these cards are just, they work independently and you don't have to pair them up with anything, but they work great in the deck. As for the Dark Magician package, this package is a bit awkward in the deck, just for the very fact that you never really want to see Dark Magician and or Dark Magician Girl, because these cards don't accomplish anything for you. However, the great card in this package is Magic Karibo, which has the effect that if you take battle damage, you're then allowed to special summon Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl from the deck and or graveyard. And having this type of versatility pretty much enables you to always have a monster on the field that will help you on later on in the duel to pretty much establish a tribute summon. So that's what the purpose of all these cards in the bottom row is meant to do. Now let's go more in depth as to the Face Knight archetype, which is the more, I guess, complicated part of the deck, but it's not that complicated, don't worry about it. Starting off, we have King, Queen, and Jack. These 3 cards are the most important cards in the deck, not because they're very powerful, but because the whole deck revolves around the 3 of them. Essentially, the main thing you need to know about these 3 cards is that if you control a face-up Queen's Knight and you normal summon King's Knight, he's then able to special summon Jack's Knight from the deck. And that's how essentially you're supposed to establish a 3 monster field to summon out the Arcana Triumph Joker and or Slifer the Sky Dragon. But the cool thing is that this deck gives you a few ways of doing that, whether it be via Joker's Knight, allowing you to substitute the name of any of these 3 cards via its effect to special summon itself, which pretty much allows you to send one of these 3 cards to the graveyard to summon itself to the field, and take the name of that card you sent to the graveyard. Typically, if you activate the effect of Joker's Knight, you want to go ahead and send your Queen's Knight to the graveyard, so you have Queen's Knights technically on the field already, and then normal summon King's Knight to then establish the 3 Knight Trinity. And additionally, Imperial Power also helps you with this very goal in mind, but it is a bit more cumbersome though. Essentially what Imperial Power does is that if you normal summon this card and it's the only monster you control, you're able to tribute it away to then special summon a combination of any of these 3 monsters, thinning the deck out so you don't draw into these monsters and establishing them onto the field already for later on during the turn. And so essentially these 2 cards are very important in the deck, and it's a good thing if you see them in your opening hand. Continuing on with the spell and trap cards, we have Thunder Speed Summon, which I'm going to combine with the Joker's Wild because they kinda are just the same card. Thunder Speed Summon is a phenomenal card in this deck that allows you to do so much. What this card essentially allows you to do is that if you control all 3 of these monsters on the field, you're then allowed to search your deck for either Arcana Triumph Joker and or Slide for the Sky Dragon. And at that, you're also allowed to perform an additional normal summon. So there are certain hands where you're able to go ahead and do this whole crazy combo where you summon everything out, activate Thunder Speed Summon out one of these 2 guys, and then get to draw until you have 6 cards in your hand, and it's kind of just like a blowout at that point. And I'll show you guys how to do that. And as I said, Joker's Wild is essentially the same card because what this card does, it allows you to send Thunder Speed Summon to the graveyard to then activate the effect of Thunder Speed Summon. Finally, we have Courts of Cards, and this card is pretty cool for the very fact that what this card does, it allows you to essentially every single turn have at least a monster on your field, because it allows you to special summon one of these 3 guys from the graveyard if you control no monsters on your field, or the only monster you control, or one of these 3 monsters, essentially giving you almost infinite resources to summon out your tribute monsters. And that's pretty much the gist of this deck. As a whole, not super complicated, fairly simple as to how it operates, and now let's move on to the test hands. Alright then, so let's say this is your opening hand during a duel, and I'm just gonna say it outright, this hand is kind of fucking insane. You have so much stuff available to you right now. Typically in a play like this, what you would want to do is you would normal summon the Imperial Power, activate the effect, sending it to the graveyard to then search out the, let's see. You know what, I think in this scenario what I would want to do, because of the way our hand is set up, I would go ahead and special summon the Queen's Knight in defense mode, and I would proceed to add King's Knight to my hand. That way, I pretty much have guaranteed that no matter what, next turn I'm going to have access to all 3 of them. Because I have Quaking Mirror Force here to protect me from destroying our Queen's Knight, or I have Swords of Revealing Light, keeping our opponent from being able to attack us. Or even if they're able to out both back rows, we still have Monster Reborn to bring her back to then on the crackback normal summon, and then special summon out the Jack's Knight. And that's not even taking into account that we did get to draw for that turn. And essentially what you would do is that you would just kind of be chilling until you're able to normal summon once again to normal summon the Slide for the Sky Dragon to the field and draw 6 cards. Until you have 6 cards. Hopefully that makes sense as to what the deck is trying to accomplish. Let's try out one more hand. Alright then, so an optimal hand for this deck looks like something like this. You want to have Joker's Knight, King's Knight, and Thunder Speed Summon, and with this hand you pretty much get to establish a Slide for the Sky Dragon, plus you draw into 6 cards, which is pretty decent. So yeah, what you would do here is you would summon out the Joker's Knight by sending a copy of, Queen's Knight to the graveyard. You know what? We're gonna need this in hand anyways. So let's go ahead and send Queen's Knight to the graveyard. There we go. And because we technically control Queen's Knight, we then can normal summon King's Knight, and he would then summon the Jack's Knight from the deck. So let's go ahead and summon it out. And because we control all 3 of these monsters technically, we can activate Thunder Speed Summon. And with that, we get to go ahead and search out Slide for the Sky Dragon, and we get to perform an additional normal summon. So let's go put these in the graveyard. Go and move this right here. And with that, we get to go ahead and draw 6 cards. And yeah, with that, we have insane advantage. The draws we got are not fantastic, but nevertheless, you know what, advantage is advantage. But yeah, that's a rough idea of what exactly the deck is trying to accomplish. Alright then, so after Yugi, we have Kaiba, and you know, it is so disappointing just how badly Konami fumbled the ball with his deck. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this deck has a very confused identity because it doesn't do anything well. You have to get very lucky in order to do anything with this deck. Essentially, what the goal of this deck is that you're supposed to try and establish a 3 monster field just like Yugi, but in a bit more of a cumbersome and less effective way. Essentially what you're trying to do is that either you're trying to go ahead and summon out the King of D to activate Flute of Summoning Dragons to summon out 2 Blue Eyes White Dragons from your hand, or summon out the King of D, activate Dragon Revival Rhapsody, and revive 2 of them from the graveyard. Pretty cool. After that, you're allowed to then tribute summon 4 Obelisk Tormentor, but here's the kicker. You have no way of summoning twice during a turn, so you kind of have to like summon one of these guys out, wait an entire turn, and then on your crackback, tribute summon for Obelisk Tormentor. But we also do have another engine in this deck with the XYZ Union deck, which technically can also do the same thing as King of D, because if you establish a XYZ Dragon Cannon, and you have all these 3 pieces in the grave banished already, you can activate Union Scramble to summon them all onto the field as tribute fodder for Obelisk. But the likelihood of this happening is very low just because this deck does not excel at anything. But yeah, that's essentially what the goal of the deck is trying to do. The main issue is that the skill doesn't really help you with that. Executive Privilege is a decent, not even a decent skill, it's a okay skill, I guess, that essentially allows Obelisk the Tormentor to attack everything on the field, which is cool. But the mulligan effect for this card is atrocious because of the fact that in order to mulligan, you need to have both Obelisk and Blue Eyes in hand to shuffle them both back to the bottom of the deck and draw 2 cards. That's not worth it at all. Finally, it does have the effect to search out Obelisk, but good god, you typically don't want to do that just because this deck is terrible and you're not really going to accomplish anything. Alright then, so the purpose of each card of this deck. That's the boss monster, as I mentioned. The Tormentor is the boss monster. And up here we have, actually let's talk about the miscellaneous stuff. From Death's Feral Imp all the way to Loop of Destruction, all these cards are just miscellaneous and don't serve any greater purpose in the deck. Additionally, we have 2 separate engines, as I mentioned. We have the Xyz Union and the Blue Eyes engine. The Xyz Union engine is not great. It used to be great in the original Battle City box because of the skill, but in this deck it's very, very awkward. Union Hanger, typically the combo is you activate Union Hanger, you search out White Dragon Head, normal summon it, equip it with Z Metal Tank, and you get a 2100 attack monster on the field. But the thing is, you then have to get lucky and draw into X-Head Cannon to do anything with that. And finally, Union Scramble, under the circumstances that you manage to tribute away all 3 of these cards to summon it out XYZ Dragon Cannon, you're allowed to special summon all 3 monsters to the field, or if you summon out any of the other fusions, you're able to summon out whatever's banished to your field. So I guess that kind of facilitates some of the materials needed for the tribute summon of the Obelisk Tormentor. Neat, I guess. As for the main engine of the deck, the Blue Eyes engine. Blue Eyes White Dragon is not great in your hand. Not really, just because it's does nothing. It just kind of chills there unless you have something else in order to team it up with. However, the King of D is a cool card that doesn't really work that well in this deck. What this card does is that on normal summon, you can discard a spell or trap card to search out either the Flute of Summoning Dragon or the Revival Dragon Rhapsody in this deck to hopefully do something later on during the turn or that very turn if you already have like a perfect hand. Additionally, we do have the trade-in in this deck to give you some level of consistency by drawing. Again, you don't mind sending Blue Eyes to the graveyard because of the Revival Dragon Rhapsody. And finally, we have Champion's Vigilance, where if you establish the Blue Eyes White Dragon with the Flute, you have an Omni-Negate. Yeah, as I said, guys, the deck is not good. It's really bad. You can get lucky and get some decent hands where you kind of just beat your opponent immediately with multiple Blue Eyes White Dragons, but like, my goodness, the odds of that happening aren't great and the deck doesn't perform all that well. Let's try out some test hands to get an idea of how bad this deck is now. Alright then, so this is what an average hand would look like for the deck, and my goodness, this is a mess. So let's go ahead and put this at the top of the deck because we did not draw into it. And wow, there really isn't a good play here. I suppose if we're going first, I'd probably just set Whitehead Dragon, just because like setting Ancient Lamp doesn't do anything, summoning out King of D does nothing, and Union Scramble doesn't do anything either. Let's go ahead and try another deck. Wow, somehow this hand is worse. Can you believe that? Let's try one more time. Damn, okay. I guess it wasn't meant to be, guys. This is really, really bad. One more. Okay, we can actually use our skill now. So let's go and put this at the top of the deck, and let's go ahead and activate our skill of Executive Privilege. Keep in mind, see how rare it is to be able to activate this skill? So we're gonna go ahead and put our Blue Eyes White Dragon to the bottom of the deck, and then we're gonna also put our Obelisk to the bottom of the deck, and then we get to draw 2 cards. And wow, we're right back where we started. I guess in this scenario, I would normal summon X-Head and set Shrink and hope I can survive. Ta-da! This is what this deck does. I don't recommend playing this one. It's really bad. Alright then, so after Kaiba's monstrosity, we now have Joey, and I genuinely love Joey's deck. This deck is actually super simple to understand, and genuinely it's like it is just the simplest deck to pilot. Essentially, Joey's deck is just a beatdown deck that on occasion tribute summons for Gilfer the Lightning, the boss monster of the deck. The cool thing about Gilfer the Lightning is that you can tribute summon him with only 2 tributes just to be a decently big monster on your field, or if you go out of your way to tribute summon using 3 monsters, you are able to just Regeki your opponent's field, which is pretty cool, granted for a 3 tribute monster. Additionally, the deck also does have other quote-unquote boss monsters with Jinzo and or Total Defense Shogun. Shogun is interesting just because it's able to attack in defense mode, and Jinzo, if you are familiar whatsoever with Speed Duels, you know just how good this card is. It's fallen out of grace a little bit of late, but it's still a phenomenal card nevertheless. Now, for the supporting cast for this deck, we have actually, for the most part, this whole deck is just kind of miscellaneous stuff. The main engine of the deck is just a warrior pile that is greatly aided with the skill of the deck, that being Battle City Slugger. And this skill is so simple, but yet so great. Essentially, what this skill says is that each warrior monster on the field gains 100 attack per warrior on the field. What this means is that if you have a field of 3 warrior monsters on the field, that means every single one of those 3 warriors is going to be gaining a 300 attack boost. That's pretty great. And that boost really stacks on with some of the monsters in this deck. Additionally, this deck also does have the Mulligan Insert skill, where you're able to reveal like a Gilfer, Insect Queen, Jinzo, and or the Legendary Fisherman, place at the bottom of the deck to draw 1 card, or just search out Gilfer the Lightning, and then you additionally get a tribute summon of a warrior monster, which is interesting, I guess. In weird situations, you are able just to summon out the Gilfer the Lightning via this effect, but most of the time you can summon out the Total Defense Shogun, I guess. But you know what? I can't complain too much about that skill. Now, the warrior engine. There isn't really all that much synergy here. The main one being Gilfer the Lightning, Gilfer the Iron Knight with the Blast with Chain, where if you summon this card, equip it with this, you're able to pop a card on the field. That's always a great combination. But besides that, all the other warriors are kind of just utility monsters. Absolute Crusaders, able to tribute itself to destroy a level 5 or higher monster your opponent controls. Blue Flame Swordsman is able to modulate its attack points during the battle phase. Valkyria Knight, if it's destroyed, it's able to special summon a warrior from the graveyard. A way to revive, Gilfer the Lightning if your opponent deals with it. We have Command Knight, which is able to boost all warriors on the field by 400 attack points, and it protects itself while you control other warriors. Deity Warrior is able to deal with any monster your opponent may have. Penguin Soldier and Invader of the Throne are supposed to be paired up with Sol and Luna, so that you can set this card during your turn, activate Sol and Luna, flip it up, and then deal with the effect that these cards have. As for the other small trap cards, we have Fissure to destroy a monster, Rhoda to search out most of your monsters, United We Stand and Fusion Sword of Musara Blade to deal a shit ton of damage, Trap Hole Spice, which is a more finicky version of Sakuretsu Armor, Fairy Box to protect your warriors, Flagrant Trap Hole to deal with an opponent's monster, and finally, Kunai with Chain with like a more awkward version of Econ, which is not bad still. And as I mentioned, super simple deck as a whole, not too complicated. Essentially, the main goal is just beat down on your opponent. That's it. Alright, let's do some test hands. Alrighty then, so here we have Joey's deck, and this is what an average hand would look like with this strategy. And as I mentioned, like there really isn't any bad hands with this deck. Let's go ahead and put her at the top of the deck. Actually, no, let's keep her in hand just because we're gonna we would activate the effect of Battle City Slugger because we don't really want to see Gilfer right now. So put him at the bottom of the deck. She would technically be our draw for that. And genuinely, like what you can do here is you can do a few things. First, because you have so many defensive cards with Kunai with Chain and Floodgate Trap Hole, you could technically, if you wanted to, begin by setting Invader of the Throne, setting these 2 cards, and kind of just ensuring that she's going to survive to be able to activate the effect preemptively. Or if you wanted to, you can return this back to your hand and just begin really aggressive by normal summoning out the Valkyria Knight. The effect of Battle City Slugger would activate, and his attack would go up to 2000. And yeah, like, and as I mentioned, it's just a beatdown strategy, so you kind of just want to have the advantage of points and just deal massive damage to your opponent. Let's go and try out another hand. And it's another hand with Invader of the Throne, so let's go and retry that. Okay, so same idea here. We would go ahead and activate the effect of our skill, putting this to the bottom of the deck, and then we would draw into our Sol and Luna. And here you actually have quite a few plays. You could begin the turn by setting your DD Warrior, and then setting our Sol and Luna. That way you have control of what happens during that turn. You could begin by setting your Command Knight, which is really tanky. It has very nice defense, and do the same thing. Or you could just save the Sol and Luna in your hand for in case you are afraid of backward removal, and just start off by setting a copy of DD Warrior, which is going to ensure that whatever your opponent summons gets destroyed by this card if they attack into it. But yeah, as mentioned, beatdown strategy, not super complex to play with. Alright then, moving away from the good guys of the set, onto the baddies. And first character up is Marik. And Marik has a interesting deck, to say the least. The main goal of this deck is a bit confusing. I mean, it's not... Okay. The deck is constructed in an interesting way where, for the most part, there isn't a crazy amount of synergy here. There is cool stuff you can do, but there isn't a full idea as to what the deck is trying to accomplish. But in short, the main goal of the deck is summoning out the Winged Dragon of Ra and supporting it with multiple cards, like the Winged Dragon of Ra in Immortal Phoenix and or the Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere mode. There's also cards like Millennium Revelation, which would allow you to revive these cards with Monster Reborn. But let's go ahead and explain what each card does now. So as I said, the main goal of the deck is pretty much just summoning out the Winged Dragon of Ra, which is like kind of like the theme of each of the main characters of the set, with Yugi, Kaiba, and Marik now. In my opinion, I think Yugi's the one that does it the best, followed by Marik, and then finally Kaiba, because Kaiba's deck is terrible. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. And this deck does that via the effects of the main skill, Advent of Ra, which is a really cool skill conceptually, because it allows you to give Ra the anime effect where it gains the attack of all the attributed monsters for its summon, but additionally you get the best version of the mulligan skill out of anyone. This pretty much allows you to mulligan any of these 3 cards that you don't want to see in your opening hand to then draw 1 card, or search out any of these 3 at any point during the duel, which is super important because of the Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere mode. The main point of this deck is summoning out the Winged Dragon of Ra, and the main way you're going to be doing this is either by tributing away 3 monsters your opponent has. You want them to overcommit to tribute away into Sphere mode, and then on the crackback you're able to get this back and summon out the Winged Dragon of Ra. And I believe it gives them how much attack? Is it like 3k? 4,000 attack points, my bad. So you're special summon the Winged Dragon of Ra with 4,000 attack points, and you pretty much cleared your opponent's field, which is pretty great. Additionally, you do have the Millennium Revelation, which is able to set up the graveyard, and typically what you want to do with this is that you want to activate Millennium Revelation, send the Winged Dragon of Ra Immortal Phoenix to the graveyard via this effect, to then search out Monster Reborn for later usage. Additionally, another great card of this deck here that kind of ties into the idea of the Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere mode is Owner Seal. Essentially, if your opponent tries to play around the idea of you summoning out, tributing away 3 other monsters to summon out the Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere mode, you can also activate Owner Seal to tribute away 2 monsters with Lava Golem. And essentially, you give rid of 2 monsters your opponent has to then give yourself a 3k attack monster, which is kind of a neat. The only issue is the fact that you do take burn damage, and that's where the other skill comes into play, pulling the strings, but we're not going to focus on this one. Moving on to the rest of the monster cast, this is where it gets a little awkward because everything else is kind of just working on its own. We have a water monster engine with Lord Poison, Lakunga, and Grenadora alongside Revival Gem, Reactor Slime, and technically Metal Reflex Slime as well. For the most part, these cards kind of work individually from each other. Lord Poison has 1 target in the graveyard with Lakunga. Lakunga can banish, I guess, any of these guys to like give you a token. I guess make summoning out Ra a bit easier on your own. Grenadora is just a big monster on the field. Revival Jam technically counts as an infinite body on the field. And finally, Reactor Slime is genuinely a good card that gives you tokens on the field to tribute it away for the Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere mode. For the Winged Dragon of Ra regular. The one thing you should know is that if you summon it by this effect, your Ra is going to be very weak unless you give up like most of your life points to only have 100 left for this. And Metal Reflex Slime is just a a great card because it's really hard to get rid of him. After the water stuff, we have like a dark engine, I guess, with Makiura, Holding Arms, Dark Geroid, and Nudoria. All 4 of these cards are pretty great. Makiura is a little more underwhelming just because of the trap cards we have in the deck. Essentially, Makiura, if it's sent to the graveyard, it's able to activate a trap card from the hand, but for the most part, you don't really want to activate any of these. Holding Arm allows you to stall out multiple turns. Dark Geroid allows you to weaken an opponent's monster, and Nudoria pretty much works as a deterrent for your opponent not to attack into it, because it's able to destroy a monster on the field when it does. And the reason I refer to this as like a dark engine is because of this card right here, Hidden Soldier, which allows you to special summon a dark monster from your hand when your opponent summons a monster. There is that synergy there, I guess, and it kind of goes into the whole idea of getting multiple monsters on the field to summon out the raw. Finally, the deck has just miscellaneous cards with Remove Trap, Malevolent Catastrophe, which are back removal, Sakuretsu Armor, which destroys any monster, and Nightmare Wheel, which helps you with burning your opponent and or stalling out until you can establish multiple monsters on the field for a tribute summon. For the most part, it's a little bit of an awkward deck, but the main thing you want to be doing with this strategy is tributing away your opponent's stuff to kind of just be a nuisance, and then eventually at one point during the duel, tribute for the Winged Dragon of Ra, and or use the effects of Immortal Phoenix to then keep cycling through these cards. So that's the main idea of this deck. Now let's try out some test hands. Alright then, so this is probably what an average hand is going to look like whenever you're playing this deck. Let's go ahead and put this at the top of the deck just because we did not draw into it. Alright then, so in a hand like this, it's a little awkward to play. If anything, I'll say this. If you're playing the Marik deck, you probably want to go second with this one. Just because you have a lot of like reactive cards in your strategy. Like for example, the Dark Geroid doesn't really do anything here just because it's fairly weak and it has no target besides itself. Let's say you went second, right? Your opponent has a monster, you get your draw for turn, and oh wow. So your hand just became so much better with this one draw. So depending on what your opponent has on their field, you could begin by normal summoning out the Dark Geroid and pretty much trying to out whatever they summoned, but he's fairly small, so you would probably hold off on that. Or better off, you could go ahead and normal summon out the Reactor Slime. And using its effect, you can go ahead and special summon 2 tokens to your field. So let's go ahead and get 2 tokens here and kind of just chill on that. Additionally, you could also set the Malevolent Catastrophe if you really wanted to as like a bluff, and or I guess like preemptively if you know your opponent plays a lot of back row immediately. And with this field alone, you are protected for a good bit, because even if they declare an attack, you can go ahead and tribute this card off to then special summon the where is it at? Metal Reflect Slime from the deck. So that's pretty cool. Let's go and do one more hand so we get the full scope of what the deck is trying to accomplish. Alright, so we're going second, and this is our opening hand. Let's see. In this scenario, because we have the Reactor Slime already, I'm tempted to go for that. But we also do have Holding Arms, which is pretty cool as well. So what I could potentially see myself doing is if they have one monster on the field, I could see myself normal summoning out the Holding Arms, making sure that monster they have isn't able to attack anymore, and we could go ahead and set our copy of Nightmare Wheel to ensure that if they summon another monster to the field, we have another card that they can't attack again with. And then on the following turn, I could see myself going ahead and summoning out the Grenador and kind of just taking care of whatever monster they have on the field. But yeah, that's roughly the idea of what the deck is trying to accomplish. It's a little hard to reflect what this deck is trying to do in a scenario where you're kind of just dueling by yourself. This is a very reactive deck, so your plays are going to vary a lot depending on what your opponent has. So do keep that in mind. Alright then, next up we have Bakura, and this is probably the most controversial character to come out of Battle City Finals, for the very fact that most people didn't think we were actually going to get the Destiny board cards, at least not all the physical versions of them. Most people thought that we were going to instead get Dark Sanctuary and then get a skill to help Dark Sanctuary facilitate the effect of Destiny board. But instead Konami said, nah, fuck that, he's getting all the Destiny board cards. And that's where we come to this scenario right here. As you have probably guessed already, the main goal of this deck is to beat your opponent via the win condition of Destiny board, and it has a bunch of cards that are supposed to help you with that goal, with legacy support like Dark Spirit Mastery, Senses of Doom being the 2 cards that come to mind immediately. But in addition, it does also have kind of like a beatdown strategy in the tuck as well, with cards like Dark Necrofear, Dark Ruler Hades, and Invader of Darkness. But for the most part, you are trying to win via the effect of Destiny board. Now, let's go and talk about the cards in the deck that are supposed to help you with that goal in mind, starting off with the skill first. And I do have to give the deck credit with that. The skill Fear of the Dark is actually pretty decent and helps you quite a bit with making the Destiny board cards not feel less bad. Essentially what this skill does, it does quite a few things. The most important effect that it has is the fact that you can reveal any spirit message card, put it at the bottom of the deck, and then draw one card, essentially allowing you to prevent any of these cards being bricks in your hand. But in addition to that, this skill also allows you to give your spirit message cards some level of protection, and at that allows you to summon them onto the field, so you can actually fulfill the condition of Destiny board of sending all 5 of these cards on the field to win the duel. The one issue with this skill, however, is the fact that in order to protect these cards, you have to summon out Dark Necrofear, which gets very cumbersome and prevents you from having any backwood to protect yourself later on during a duel. So that's the main issue with the deck. Alright, then now let's talk about the cards in the deck that are supposed to help you out with the goal in mind. So of course we already know these are like the main cards of the strategy, but we also do have Stark Spirit Mastery and Senses of Doom, which are 2 cards that allow you to get access to the Destiny board. Senses of Doom allows you to tribute itself off to activate the Destiny board from your deck and or graveyard, and Dark Spirit Mastery allows you to discard a card to then add this card and or Dark Necrofear from the deck to the hand. And yeah, that's all the support that this deck actually has. We also do have the support for the Dark Necrofear, which include cards like Sangand and Fiendish Rhino Warrior alongside Snipe Hunter, and I guess Doomdog of Orkos. That's another card that comes to mind. This card allows you to search out the Dark Necrofear, Sangand allows you to search out Fiendish Rhino Warrior, and Snipe Hunter. The reason these cards are important in mind is because Snipe Hunter allows you to fuel up the graveyard to have the summon condition for Dark Necrofear set up a lot easier, but also allows you to deal with multiple cards on the board if you get lucky. And Fiendish Rhino Warrior is probably the best card of the deck that allows you to set up multiple fiends in the graveyard to make summoning out Dark Necrofear a lot easier. Also, Foolish Burial does the same thing as well. So this is like the main cards you want to like see at some point during a turn to set up the Dark Necrofear a lot easier. Besides that, everything else in the deck is kind of just miscellaneous. We have Spiritualism, which deals with back row. Premature Burial allows you to special summon a card from the graveyard. Offering to the Doom destroys a monster on the field. Zoma gives you an annoying monster on your field. Doom Caliber Knight, cool card, big monster, and it works almost as a Omni Negate of some sort, for monsters at least. I already said Dark Ruler Hades and Invader of Darkness are kind of just miscellaneous boss monsters of the strategy. And finally, we have like the reject monsters right here with Winged Minion, Night Assailant, Fusion Devourer, and finally Jaws of Demise. Night Assailant is probably the best one out of the 4 just because it does have the flip effect where it pops a monster on the field. Winged Minion, I guess, has some level of versatility where it's able to power up a card like Dark Necrofear, which is pretty weak typically. Jowls is niche, and Fusion Devourer is just a bad card. This card has like no utility, unless I guess you're fighting against like Kaiba, I guess. But yeah, for the most part, as I mentioned, the deck is mainly trying to establish the Destiny board and or the Dark Necrofear and trying to homogenize the 2 of them to make the strategy work. But now let's go and do some test hands in order to get a better idea of how the deck does this. Alright then, so this is an average hand for Bakura, and this is one of the scenarios where you don't want to see yourself in. So in this scenario, what I would probably do is something along the lines of this. I would go ahead and begin by sending Spirit Message I to the bottom of the deck. We would draw into Doom Caliber Knight, and then I would proceed to set Night Assailant to kind of just ensure that our opponent doesn't begin to steamroll us. On the following turn, they would probably attack into the Night Assailant. This was sent into the graveyard. You would pop their monster. You would draw for turn, and because you have another Spirit Message card, you can send that to the bottom of the deck, draw one more time, and now you're in a much better position just because you can normal summon Sangyan, going for 1000 damage. You could go ahead and return this to the hand. You can normal summon the Doom Caliber Knight, going for 1900 attack points, and or you can normal summon into the Fiendish Rhino Warrior and kind of just tempt your opponent to kind of out these cards. And yeah, that's roughly what a Bakura deck would do. Let's see if we can get a hand with the Spirit Message cards. Ooh, okay, this is a decent hand. Alright, so let's go ahead and say this is our opening hand. Let's put this at the top of the deck. And what I would do here is I would begin by activating Foolish Burial. And what we would go ahead and do is go ahead and send a copy of Fiendish Rhino Warrior to the graveyard. After that, I would activate the effect of him to send Fusion Devourer to the graveyard as well, just because this card is terrible. And with that, we pretty much cleared out multiple cards from our deck. After that, I would go ahead and begin by setting Destiny board and summoning out Doom Caliber Knight, kind of just preventing our opponent from activating any monster effects and or just being able to deal big damage with this card. And yeah, that's a rough idea what the deck is trying to accomplish. Alright then, we'll do one more hand and then we'll move on to the next character. This is a pretty decent hand. So in this hand, I would begin by sending this to the bottom of the deck. We would draw into Premature Burial, and then after that, I would proceed to set Jowls of Demise, setting our copy of Offering to the Doom. What can happen here is a few things that can happen here. First things first, if your opponent tries to out the Jowls of Demise and you don't want them to, you can go ahead and protect it with the Offering to the Doom, or if your opponent proceeds to play defensively as well, on the crackback you can flip some of the Jowls and take control of one monster that your opponent may have to tribute it off for the Dark Ruler Hades. Or additionally, you could just allow your opponent to destroy the Jowls of Darkness, then activate Premature Burial, bring it back, and summon out Dark Ruler Hades and go from there while keeping the Offering to the Doom still alive. So yeah, multiple things you can do with this deck, but yeah, hopefully you guys get a better understanding of how to pilot Bakura's strategy. Alright then, so now we're on to Odion, and Odion is interesting, I guess, for the very fact that he ends up getting two separate strategies in one. We have both the Trap Monster strategy alongside Pac-Man, and they don't work perfectly together. Don't get me wrong, it's nowhere near as bad as what they did with Kaiba, but nevertheless, I kind of wish they would have focused in on one of those two decks more than the other. Now, the main idea of this deck is essentially either establish one of these trap monsters to kind of take control of the duel, or tribute them off to summon out one of your tribute monsters like the Mystic Beast of Serket, Guardian Sphinx, and or End of Anubis. And or establish a Pac-Man monster to then slowly but surely take over the duel with their very annoying effects like drawing a card, popping back row, or popping monsters. And that's pretty much the idea of this deck. Now let's go ahead and break it down card by card to better explain it and give a better picture of what the deck is trying to accomplish. So starting off with the skill. The skill Royal Temple of the Kings allows you with the aforementioned idea of the trap monsters. Essentially what this skill does, it once per turn allows you to pay 500 life points to pretty much special summon any of these guys that turn they are set, pretty much enabling you to have a monster on the field immediately. But in addition to that, another cool thing this skill does is that it allows you to pretty much summon out the Mystic Beast of Serket without having to worry about it destroying itself via its own effect, which is neat, I guess, but like you aren't able to search this card out, you aren't able to mulligan this card either, and it kind of just chills on the field. It's not a crazy card at all, which is a kind of an issue with this strategy. The cool thing about this deck is the fact that Tiki Soul and Tiki Curse work together really well. Tiki Curse pretty much allows you that if any of your trap monsters battle an opponent's monster, that monster it gets destroyed after damage calculations. While Tiki Soul pretty much allows you to protect any of your trap monsters from being destroyed by battle and or card effect by setting itself back into the back row, essentially creating a really annoying loop where Tiki Curse is allowing you to destroy any card, and Tiki Soul is allowing you to protect any of them by setting itself back into the back row. And again, really cool idea with these two cards in mind. And I kind of wish they would have doubled down on that idea more. Moving on, we have the tribute monsters for the deck, that being Mystic Beast of Serket. It's just a beater, that's all it does. Guardian Sphinx, it's kind of a Pac-Man card, so I should probably pair it up with these guys, but it is a tribute monster, another boss monster of the deck. And End of Anubis, which is a graveyard shutdown card, and it's really powerful. Additionally, we do have Gravekeeper's Guard, which is more of a miscellaneous monster. It's just a very defensive card that allows you most of the time to survive the battle phase and deal with an opponent's monster to kind of guarantee that you're going to have a tribute monster on your turn. Now then, for the Pac-Man's part of the deck, we have the Guardian Sphinx, as I mentioned, which is the boss monster of Pac-Man, where every turn when it's flipped face up, it's able to return all monster your opponent controls back to their hand, which can get really annoying and kind of just snowball really quickly. We have Swarm of Centipedes, which pretty much every turn allows you to flip over another monster that's set, essentially allowing you to proc the effect of all the Pac-Man cards. Or you're also able to just book a Moon card on the field in case if that comes up. We have the Swarm of Scarabs, which is able to pop monsters, Locust, which is able to pop back row, and Lakuta, which is able to draw you every single turn. And typically, in a good Pac-Man deck, you're able to just keep cycling through these effects and to the point your opponent is just not able to compete anymore. Moving on to the spell and trap cards, we have the defensive cards that are supposed to help with like the Pac-Man stuff with Swords of Radiant Light, Book of Moon, Waboku, and Curse of Anubis alongside Ordeal of a Traveler. All of these cards are supposed to help you protect yourself from the battle phase. Moving on, we have Mirage of Nightmare. I don't love this card in this this deck for the very fact that yes, it is great card advantage, but for the most part, you don't want your cards in the graveyard because it's very hard to recover them and they don't do anything there. But they do give you at least Mystical Space Typhoon to kind of pair it up to where you don't have to pay the cost of Mirage Nightmare. So I guess there's that. Finally, we have Judgment of Anubis, which kind of works with like everything in the deck. It's able to help you protect your cards to stall out the duel and or your trap monsters if your opponent tries to deal with them. And finally, Double Snare. It's a bad card. It doesn't really do anything. It's very, very situational. And yeah, that's pretty much Odion. Not crazy complicated, but it's just a bit awkward in the way that it does everything in the deck. Now let's move on to some test hands. Alright then, so here we have Odion's deck, and as I mentioned, I'm not a huge fan of the way the deck pilots, but this is an okay hand, I think. So what I would probably do with this hand is I would go ahead and begin with our skill. I can see myself doing a few things. First, I can see myself going ahead and setting our Swarm of Scarabs to begin the turn. I could see myself activating the effect of Royal Temple to go ahead and summon out our Tiki Curse to the field. Put in the Spell and Chakra Zone, move it to the field, and then I could see myself setting the Apophis and the Waboku. Doing this does a couple of things. Alright, so with this we pretty much established a 3-monster field. We have the Tiki Curse, we have and the Abominable Apophis, and we have a Swarm of Scarabs, which is, you know what, things considered, this is a really good hand. So on our opponent's turn, they would probably go ahead and summon a monster out to try and out these cards. If they try doing that, you can activate Waboku to prevent it from destroying any of your cards. You can also activate the Apophis to bring it out to the field and kind of just guaranteeing that Tiki Curse is going to be able to out any monster they have because of the Apophis. Or if they don't do anything, or if you wanted to protect it with Waboku on your turn, you would then go ahead and activate the effect of Locust to then go ahead and pop a back row on their field, proceed to moving it back to face down, and then from there you're kind of just like profiting off the effects of these cards. So this was a pretty decent hand with this deck. Let's try one more. Okay, this hand is a lot more awkward. It's not that bad actually. So let's go and put this to the top of the deck. And what I would personally do here is I would just begin by setting Deslakuta and activating Swords of Revealing Light. And from here, we would just hope that our opponent does have back removal. On our turn, we would draw for turn, activate the effect of Deslakuta, draw another card, and depending on what situation you really are in, if you're not in a hurry, you could just keep the Deslakuta, set the Swarm of Locusts, and then kind of just try to take over the duel from there. Or additionally, you could always just return this back to the hand, tribute off the Deslakuta, to then tribute summon for the Mystic Beast of Serket and or the End of Anubis, depending on the matchup. And then as well, you will have these sorts of Revealing Light as protection, as well as the Book of Moon. But I think preferably for me, I would try to win with the Pac-Man stuff right now, just because we have such defensive cards. We'll do one more hand and then we'll move on to the next character. Okay, so this is a really interesting hand. We'll go ahead and put this at the top of the deck. And what I would do here is you can do a few things. You could activate the effect of your skill, summoning out the embodiment of Apophis, sending it to the graveyard, and tribute summoning for the End of Anubis. Or if you really wanted to, you could instead just set the Swarm of Centipedes with the embodiment of Apophis face up with a Curse of Anubis set, pretty much ensuring that you're going to protect whatever monster you have on the field. But with some of these decks, they are able to summon multiple cards per turn, so it might not be the most effective way of protecting your cards. But yeah, that's roughly an idea of what the Odion deck is trying to do. Alrighty, so now we're on to Ishizu, and Ishizu has one of the strongest decks to come out of the Battle City set. This deck is incredibly powerful, and in short, it's 2 strategies in one. Well, kind of 3 strategies in one, just because there is the main idea of the deck, there is the Earth Fairy part of the deck, and then there's the Gravekeeper part of the deck. The deck it's incredibly powerful. The main goal of the deck is activating the effect of Exchange of Spirit to pretty much just put your opponent in a really awkward situation where you can deck them out if you do it correctly via the effect of Exchange of Spirit and the skill of the deck, that being As I Predicted. Which, you know what, let's go ahead and dive into As I Predicted. I've seen some people get confused about this skill as to what the purpose is, but it's actually a really good skill and I like it a lot. Essentially what this skill does is that during your draw phase, it allows you to look at the 2 top cards of your deck and then add one of them to your hand and send the other one to the graveyard. This is a really important effect for the very reason that you don't mind having your Gravekeeper monsters in the graveyard for the very fact that you're able to revive them with the effect of Rite of Spirit, but primarily you want to have your Earth Fairies in the graveyard because of the effects of like Mudora or Mudora. which allow you to benefit from those cards. So sending those cards to the graveyard is not bad at all. Also, keep in mind, you want to have a big graveyard to be able to activate the effect of Exchange of the Spirit. So that's really important. But the skill continues. In addition to pretty much allow you to like take a look at the type of card of your deck and pretty much choose what you get and what you don't, it also makes it to where it's easier to activate Exchange of Spirit by having you only be the card player that needs to have 15 or more cards in the graveyard. And additionally, you are also able to activate the effect of Exchange of Spirit from the graveyard, which makes it even better. Just because if you draw into this card, you can just say, yeah, don't want this, go to the graveyard instead. And yeah, as a whole, great skill, and the deck works great with it. Now, as I mentioned, there is two other decks in this as well, with the Earth Fairy deck and the Gravekeeper deck, which surprisingly enough don't clash with each other that much. For the Earth Fairy deck, we have the all-star of the deck with Mudora the Sword of Oracle and Cataclysm Crusted Kazafita. These two cards are incredible. Mudora just sets up the whole deck by being able to mill a Earth Fairy monster, special summon itself, and then set up the Gravekeeper Trap Hole, which then pairs up both these decks together because this card pairs them up really well. Additionally, the Cataclysm is able to pretty much give you a really annoying body on the field whenever a Earth monster you control gets destroyed. So if your opponent runs over any of these, congratulations, you get a big ass monster on your field. That allows you to mill a card from your deck too. So that's incredibly powerful. As for the other Earth Fairy monsters, they're all mid, with the exception of like Kelbeck, which is able to like bounce a card back to the hand, which is pretty cool. But I mean, Agito gives you the chance of special summoning a fairy from the graveyard. Mudora gets decently big. Keldo is ass. And Zolga, it's probably never going to come up. But yes, as I mentioned, the Gravekeeper's Trap Hole is actually really great for the very fact that it has quite a few effects in play. If you have Exchanged the Spirit in the graveyard, your opponent isn't able to access their graveyard. They can't summon cards from the graveyard. They can't move stuff in the graveyard. Their graveyard is off limits. But in addition, the most important thing about this card is the fact that once per turn, you're able to discard a card to then add a Gravekeeper monster or an Earth Fairy monster from your deck to your hand, which is super important because this card, as I said, joins these two decks really well together. You can search out the Mudora that sets up all your plays. You can search up the Cataclysm, which does the same thing as well. So Gravekeeper Trap Hole, insanely powerful in this strategy. Now let's move on to the Gravekeeper part of the deck. And this is where things get really annoying because Commandant is able to search out Necro Valley. And Necro Valley is, oh boy, it's a hell of a card that you don't want to have to deal with if you aren't prepared for it. Essentially giving all your Gravekeeper monsters a 500 attack and defense boost, making them all really intimidating to deal with. But additionally, it just makes the graveyard obsolete. You cannot access the graveyard if you're your opponent. As for the other monsters in this deck, we have Spy, which is able to summon another one from the deck. We have Descendant, which is able to deal with monsters on the field. Recruiter, which is able to search out most of the deck. And we have Oracle, which is the boss monster of the Gravekeeper monsters. And this card is really intimidating as well. Moving on to the other cards, we have Rite of Spear, which is able to revive a Gravekeeper monster from the graveyard and ignores the effect of Necro Valley. And now we move on to the miscellaneous stuff. Drag down to the grave, draw a card for the deck, and again sets up the graveyard. Badging Shield makes your monsters huge, while the Disruption makes you really annoying to attack into. Last one's with Tribute, punishes your opponent for tribute summoning. And finally, Air Knight Parshaft is just a generically good fairy monster. As I mentioned, this deck is incredibly powerful, it does everything so well, and it is just a joy to play. Now let's go into some test hands so you can get an understanding of just how powerful this deck really is. Alright then, so let's say you are dueling with this deck and this is your opening hand. What you could do here is quite a bit. So I would begin by activating the effect of Mudora to special summon itself to the field. I would summon it out in defense mode by sending the Agito to the graveyard. And then after that, we get access to our continuous trap card. Let's go ahead and set this to the spawn trap card zone. And then after that, you can do a few more things. You can send the Commandant to the graveyard, then to the graveyard, and then search out your Necro Valley to your hand. And then after that, you can go ahead and activate the Necro Valley. You can go ahead and set the Rite of Spirit and just kind of chill on that as your board. Or you could also just keep these two cards in your hand and then have your Gravekeeper's Trap Hole be live on the next turn. So if your opponent decides to out the Mudora, you can search out the Cataclysm and then go ahead and just summon this card out if they decide to get bold and attack into you. So it's completely up to you what you want to do with this hand. So there's a lot of different paths you can take with it. All right, let's try out one more hand. All right, we'll do this hand as well as if we were going second. And we'll go ahead and send both this to the graveyard and the top card as well. Alright then, so in this scenario, I would 100% add the Drag Down into the Grave to our hand, keep the Zolga in the graveyard, and from here, I could see myself setting the Gravekeeper Spy. You could activate the effect of Drag Down into the Grave, but more likely than not, your opponent's going to send Parchef to the graveyard, so I would probably keep that in hand just for the return, and from there, you kind of just go with the vibe of the duel and make your plays accordingly. But yeah, that's pretty much Ishizu. It's not the most complicated deck out there. It's fairly simple. It just has a lot of very powerful cards available to them. Alright then, and finally we have Mai with the Amazoness / Harpy deck, and this is my personal favorite deck to come out of the Battle City final set, just for the very fact that this deck is incredibly fun to play with, but also absolutely fucking busted. This deck is so annoying to go up against, but very fun to pilot. Now, essentially what this deck is, well, there really isn't a game plan, just because, just like Joey, this is kind of just like a beatdown deck where it just has so much bullshit tied together that it makes it very difficult to play against. And you'll understand once we actually start breaking down all the cards in the deck. But before we break down all the cards, it's very important to go ahead and talk about the main skill of the deck, that being Tribal Unity, which ties this whole thing with a nice little bow. So what this skill does, it's the following. Harpy monsters are treated as Amazoness monsters and vice versa, meaning that if you have a Harpy on the field, it's also an Amazoness monster on the field, and if you control a Amazoness on the field, it's also a Harpy on the field, which is really, really good. But in addition, what this skill does as well is that once per duel, you can discard a monster from your hand to target a Harpy and or an Amazoness monster you control, have it gain the attack of the monster discarded equal to its level times 200. Most of the monsters in this deck are level 4, meaning that at any point during a duel, you're able to discard a monster to give that card a 800 attack boost, which is very, very powerful and can come up in random situations. Alright then, so now that we understand the skill, it's time to talk about the deck in itself. So starting off with the Harpy line. So first card up is Harpy's Pet Dragon, Fearsome Fire Blast. This is one of the boss monsters of the deck alongside Amazoness Queen. And this card is pretty awesome just for the very fact that it has one of the easiest summoning conditions, for the very fact that you just have to control a level 6 or lower wind monster on the field, and you have a lot of targets in this deck, and it allows you to special summon it from the hand. But the coolest thing about this card is that while it's face up on the field, it protects pretty much everything in this deck, where your opponent isn't able to target any Harpy monster, because keep in mind, Amazoness cards are also treated as Harpies in this deck for an attack, meaning that they have to deal with this card before they're able to attack into any of your Harpy monsters. So that's a pretty great card. Additionally, we also do have Harpy Dancer, which is a more situational card that pretty much allows you to do a double summon with wind monsters. Situationally good, but still a decent card. Harpy Queen is able to search out the Harpy Hunting Ground, which helps you deal with your opponent's back row. Harpy Channeler is one of the best cards in the deck for the very fact that it's able to set up a lot of plays. You're able to pitch a Harpy monster, or a Harpy card to the graveyard to then special summon any Harpy monster from the deck, meaning that you can typically summon out your Harpy's Pet Dragon, Fearsome Fire Blast from the deck, and kind of have like a very defensive play for the turn 1. Moving on, we have Harpy Lady 1, 2, and Cyber Harpy Lady alongside Harpy Lady Sisters. All of these cards are situationally good. Moving on, we also do have Hysteric Sign. This card is phenomenal because of the fact that it's able to search out Elegant Egotist, but additionally, it has a really broken effect that if this card is sent to the graveyard, it's able to add up to 3 Harpy cards from your deck and add them to your hand, which is pretty insane, and it's kind of like a deterrent for opponents to deal with it while it's face up on the field. But do keep in mind that this effect is the effect to search out Elegant Egotist and the effect to search out 3 cards from your deck are separate effects that can't activate on the same turn, so it's really important to keep in mind. Also, I did make the mistake at one point of saying that Channeler is able to pitch Hysteric Sign from your hand. I was wrong because Hysteric Sign doesn't have Harpy in its name. It has only Harpy in its text, so it's not a valid target. So do keep that in mind. Continuing on, we have Hysteric Party, and this is a really great card for the Harpy strategy for the very fact that it allows you to special summon multiple Harpies from the graveyard. One thing I will say about the Harpy side, at least, is the fact that this side of the deck is very xenophobic for the very fact that almost every single Harpy card specifically requires you to control a Harpy Lady. And the main issue with that is the fact that the skill Tribal Unity only gives your Amazoness monsters the name Harpy, not Harpy Lady specifically. So for that very reason, most of the Harpy cards are not going to work with these cards. But the main one that does work with them is the Harpy Pet Dragon. So that's super important to keep in mind. Alright, now that we're done with the Harpy side, let's go and talk about the Amazoness side. And the Amazoness side works a lot better with the Harpies. So first card up is the Heart and Soul of this deck with Amazoness Princess. This card is absolutely insane. It's incredible and so powerful. So what this card does is on summon, it's able to search out a Harpy. It's able to search out an Amazoness Bone Trap card from your deck to your hand. The card you're going to be searching out like 99% of the time is Amazoness Onslaught, which is a ridiculously broken trap card. But in addition to that, this card does more. When this card declares an attack, it's able to discard a card to then special summon an Amazoness monster from the deck. Typically, you're going to be summoning out Amazoness Queen. That way, you have your Amazoness monsters that have battle protection, which is really important when you pair it up with Onslaught. And because you declared an attack and summon the monster, if you do this, you can then just decide not to attack anymore that turn, and then you have a Onslaught available to you that your opponent then has to deal with on the crackback, which is super annoying. After that, we have Amazoness Chainmaster, which is kind of like a whatever card. Amazoness Swordswoman is a reverse burn card, which is pretty cool. And Queen, as I mentioned, protects your Amazoness cards from being destroyed by battle, which protects all these cards as well over here. After that, we have Amazoness Call, which just searches the whole deck. We have Amazoness Fighting Spirit, which is really cool because it powers up everything in the deck by 1000 attack points, which is incredible. And as I mentioned, Amazoness Onslaught. The reason why this card is incredibly powerful is for the very fact that after damage calculation, if your Amazoness monster battle an opponent's monster while this card is face up on the field, you can banish that opponent's monster. And that is absolutely insane. The fact that this card works with the whole deck, meaning that if you attack with a Harpy or an Amazoness monster, you're banishing an opponent's card, is incredibly broken. And that's what makes this deck so annoying to face off against. And finally, we have Mirror Wall and Windstorm of Etaqua, which are just generically good cards. And yeah, that's pretty much the breakdown as to how exactly Mai's deck works. And now, let's go ahead and do some test hands. Alright then guys, so let's say this is your opening hand for Harpies. Let's go ahead and put this away real quick. Put that on top of the deck. Alright, so in this opening hand, you have quite, you have one main option. So, what I would personally do here is that I would go ahead and activate the effect of Hysteric Sign. I would go ahead and pick up a copy of Elegant Egotist, put that in our hand. I would go ahead and then normal summon Harpy Dancer, activate the Elegant Egotist, summoning out our Harpy Lady Sisters in defense mode. And then after that, I would go ahead and probably use the effect of the Harpy Dancer to put it back in our hand and saving it for a later turn. That way we're just kind of chilling on Harpy Lady Sisters that has a beefy defense stat and have a bunch of other cards for the following turn. Alright, let's go and try out another hand. With this hand, we'll pretend that we're going second. And yeah, what a hand to do that with. So with this hand, we're going to go ahead and activate the effect of Harpy Queen. We're going to send her to the graveyard. And with her, we're going to go ahead and search out our Harpy Hunting Ground to our hand. Now, it is important that you play Harpy Hunting Ground in a fairly smart way, just because Harpy Hunting Ground it's not an optional effect. You have to pop a back row whenever you summon a Harpy monster. So let's imagine that our opponent has like 3 back rows, right? That way we can play as loose as we want with it. So what I would do here is that I would go ahead and normal summon out the Harpy Hunting Ground. I would then normal summon Harpy Channeler, activate the effect of her. This is going to change the effect of Hunting Ground, and we would pop 1 back row opponent has. I would use your effect to then go ahead and send to the graveyard our Harpy Lady Sister 2. And with her, we're going to go ahead and summon out Harpy Pet Dragon in defense mode. That's way she's protected from any battle of damage. The summon of Harpy's Pet Dragon is not going to activate the effect of Hunting Ground, so do keep that in mind. After that, we'll go ahead and activate the effect of Elegant Egotist. And if you want to pop all your opponent's back row, you could by summoning out Dancer. And Dancer would allow you to go ahead and bounce back the Channeler, and then you could summon out Channeler once again. But what I would personally do here, just so I can get some good damage in, I would go ahead and either summon out Harpy Lady 1 or Harpy Lady. For the fun of it, we'll go ahead and summon out Harpy Lady 1. And with this, we're going to be giving all our Harpy monsters a 500 attack boost. So that's going to put our Channeler to 1900 attack points. And that's going to put our Harpy Lady 1 at 1800. And with that, we have a fairly beefy monster lineup here. We're going to be doing decent damage. We popped 2 of our opponent's back row, and our harpy monsters are being protected from any battle destruction. Okay, this hand gives us the Amazon stuff. That's what I meant to say earlier. So with this hand, let's go ahead and activate Call. Call is going to give us access to our Princess, and with Princess, okay, so we're going to go ahead and special summon Princess, and then we're going to search out our Onslaught. We're not actually special summoning Princess, by the way, but you would normal summon Princess. Princess would then give you access to your Onslaught. You would then set Onslaught, and I would always activate the Hysteric Sign just so you can go ahead and thin out the deck, add this to your hand. And with this alone, you kind of just guarantee that if your opponent decides to attack you, you're gonna go ahead and out whatever monster they attack you with. So there's that. Additionally, another cool thing is that when you activate Onslaught, you're also allowed to special summon 1 from your hand. So if your opponent attacked, you do have 2 monsters on your field. So that's kind of cool. So there's that. Neat. As I said, Amazonas isn't crazy. It is a crazy deck. It's not crazy complicated. So there you go. Alright then, guys, and with that, this concludes today's video. If you have any more questions, then feel free to let me know in the comment section below, and or just go ahead and join the Discord that I have for my channel. It's completely free, and it's going to be linked in the description below. In the Discord, you can feel free to ask as many questions as you like. Anyone in the communities will be willing to help you, and I will jump in as well if you need any further help and assistance. Also, if you guys would like to see me do this again for any of the other Speed Duel boxes, then let me know in the comment section below as well. I kind of just figured that with Speed Duel Battle City Finals being the last one that came out and being the most complicated one out of every box we've gotten so far, it would probably be the best one to cover. Also, it's the one that I've seen the most amount of people ask for help with. But if there's any other Speed Duel box you guys want me to cover, let me know, and I'll do my best to covering it as well. But with that being said, if you did end up enjoying today's video and would like to support the channel, then leaving a like and subscribe to the channel is the best way of doing so. And yeah, with that, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.